This happened 2 years ago, on the day of my 28th birthday. I was working at a small double-sided, drive-through only, coffee stand about 30 minutes outside of Seattle. I'd been working there for about a year at this point, and was always scheduled to work the closing shifts during the week, and then the opening shift on the weekends. In the 7 years I had worked as a barista at this point, I had yet to experience anything like what I encountered that day, and it is my deepest hope that I am never faced with it again. It was Thursday, around 6:45 p.m. I was preparing to close the stand at 7 p.m. like usual, and it was rare that I would have many customers come through the stand past 6:30. Because of this, I was surprised when I looked up from cleaning the espresso machine to see a walk-up customer waiting at the open window, smiling at me. For safety reasons, I normally refrain from serving walk-up customers after dusk, but because the window on the side of the stand he approached was already open, I was kind of forced to acknowledge him. Reluctantly, I decided to serve him. He introduced himself as Ivan. He was around my age, seemed reasonably well kept in the sense his clothing and overall appearance looked pretty clean, and despite a slight accent, his English was very good. His eyes, however, were utterly unnerving. His gaze made my stomach feel uneasy. Immediately, my intuition was alerting me that something about this individual was very wrong. Every red flag possible was beginning to show in my mind, and I could not shake the deep, almost overwhelming sense of darkness that I felt coming from this person. There was an evil in him that I couldn't ignore, though I would soon find out exactly why I was feeling this way. After greeting him as politely as I could manage despite my growing hesitations, I began preparing my machine to make his drink. However, he didn't seem to know what he wanted to order, and I asked him twice what I could get started for him before I silently recognized the fact that he was very likely not here for the coffee. Eventually, he abandoned ordering altogether, and instead directed our interaction towards small talk. He asked me where I was from, how long I'd been working at this stand, etc. I answered each one of these questions with short, abrupt answers, hoping my tone and clear lack of engagement would convey the fact that I wasn't interested in continuing any further conversation, since he was not a paying customer, and because I was about to close. After a long pause, he asked slowly, "So, do you have a boyfriend?" Annoyed, I replied curtly, "No." At this point, I was completely ready to end our interaction, so I told him that I needed to finish closing up so that I could go home. Upon hearing this, he walked away from the window he'd been standing at, mentioning in his dissent that he is looking forward to seeing me again very soon. A minute or so passes, and he was out of sight, yet my gut told me that he was not, however, far away. I could feel his dark energy nearby, and I knew he was watching me from somewhere beyond my line of vision. Cautiously, I closed up the stand, locked the doors and windows, walked to my car, and drove home. By the following day, I had all but forgotten about the encounter I'd had with the guy, and went to work as usual. 7 p.m. rolls around once again. I'm just about to end my shift and close the stand. I'm nearly finished closing out the register when a brief moment of movement catches my eye from outside the window on the opposite side of the stand. I turn my head towards the area in question, and there, in full view of both me and the security cameras, stood the guy from yesterday. My stomach sank quicker than I knew previously to be possible, and I was immediately very aware of how cold it was inside of that stand. He smiled at me with a predatory-like grin, waved, and then proceeded to open the closed window in front of him, instead of waiting for me to cross the small distance within the stand that stood between us and open it for him, as I usually would. And although he didn't present himself aggressively, there was something incredibly threatening about his choosing to do that. It left me feeling hopelessly unsafe in that moment, and that was not a feeling I was particularly familiar with, or, as I learned, particularly fond of. Once I was finally able to bring myself back into a present state of mind, I cleared my throat and told him as firmly as possible that I was off the clock and wouldn't be able to make anything for him as my machine was already cleaned, and my register closed out for the day. His smile widened further as he replied, "It's okay. I didn't come for the coffee. I came for you." Upon hearing this, I noticed a shift in the energy building between us. The fear I'd previously been overcome with now made a sudden and jolting transition into a redlining level of irritation. "I don't care what you came for," I told him as sternly as I could manage. "It's going to have to wait until tomorrow because I am closed." At this, he chuckled a bit, before finally raising both his hands in an indication of surrender, saying, all right, fair enough." His smile disappeared. His eyes became even more focused on me. His gaze intensified. "Then I will see you tomorrow," he said, in a way that felt less like a statement and more like a threat. I swallowed hard, and once he was out of view, I rushed to the window and slammed it shut, throwing the lock into place. Again, despite not being visible to confirm his presence nearby, I knew that he was there, and I could feel his eyes fixated upon me. I left the stand quickly and got into my car to drive home. This time, however, he remained heavily on my mind for the rest of the night, robbing me entirely of any sleep at all. The following morning was a Saturday, so per my usual schedule, I got up insanely early to work the 5 a.m. opening shift. I arrived at the stand 10 minutes to 5, and for the first few hours of my shift everything was normal. 8:30 rolls around, and it's now, finally, no longer freezing and dark outside, as the November mornings here tend to be. The sun had broken through the clouds and was steadily burning them off. As I was admiring the weather out the window of the stand, I noticed a familiar truck pulling up to the stand. As it neared closer, I recognized it as my ex-boyfriend, Jonathan. I found this exceptionally odd, as he and I were not currently on very friendly terms, thanks to his decision to end our relationship by sleeping with someone else while he was still living with me at the apartment I was renting at the time. Once he pulled up to the window I was now standing at, I asked him skeptically what he was doing here. "I'm sure I'm probably not someone you're wanting to see today. I know, but I just wanted to come by and wish you a happy birthday in person and see how things were going." Just as I was about to thank him for the birthday wishes and inform him that no, he isn't someone I'd want to see on that day, I was still pretty hurt from his cheating, I noticed someone about 100 yards away, approaching the stand on foot. It was Ivan. Suddenly, Jonathan's presence there at the stand with me shifted dramatically from unwanted to very, very appreciated. I whispered quickly to Jonathan that I needed him to stay here with me, even if another customer pulls up for service behind him, until the man who just walked up was gone. I could tell he was able to register the fear in my eyes, and he agreed immediately to stay. I turned to face the open window on the opposite side of the stand, just as Ivan approached it. I walked slowly over to him and noticed right away that he had been crying. His eyes were bloodshot and tears were still evident on his cheeks. Disregarding this obvious emotional state, I began to inform him that he needed to leave because I was not going to serve him, when he cut off my words abruptly. "I don't need this anymore. You can have it." As he said this, he threw what I later came to recognize as a Russian passport into the stand through the open window. I picked it up, puzzled, and asked him why he no longer needed it. "I just won't." Who the hell throws their passport at someone? I thought. I looked over my shoulder at Jonathan, who now had a "what the fuck is going on" look on his face, and shrugged. I turned back to Ivan, only to realize he was no longer standing in the window. I poked my head out the window to see where he'd gone, and saw him rounding the corner toward the back of the stand. I watched him walk around the stand in 3 full loops before he finally stopped again at one of the opened windows. This is the point where the dynamics of our interaction shifted indefinitely. Ivan had stopped crying. His tears had now been replaced with a look of complete and utter insanity. "God came to me last night in my dreams," he began. "He told me that you will be my wife. He told me, you are my wife." A sickening smile crept over his face as my stomach literally dropped to the ground. "You are my wife," he stated again. You are my wife, and you will come with me now." At this, he attempted to lift himself onto the small ledge beneath the window in an attempt to lift himself into the stand. Realizing what he was doing, I quickly slammed the window shut, locking it. He pushed his weight back off the ledge, paused, and then proceeded to give me a look that truly made me understand the meaning of having one's blood run cold. Before I continue any further, let me just say that until you personally experience a situation that demands you to access your fight or flight response, you have no idea what that response is going to ultimately be. I don't care how tough you feel you are. The type of fear that's required to trigger this defense mechanism in the first place is more than most people realize, and how you will react to it will be involuntary. Until this point, I had always figured myself to be a fight type of person. I'm not. At all. I came to learn that beyond any doubt on this day. By now I had dialed 911 and was frantically trying to relay as much information as possible to the operator while attempting to keep one eye on Ivan, who was now at the back door, attempting to figure out the numbered key code to release the electronic lock securing the door. As I spoke to the 911 operator, I could hear the faint beep, beep, beep of keys being punched on the electrical lock. Knowing that there would be literally a 1 in nearly infinite chance that he'd manage to guess the 4-number code, I didn't feel too concerned with the thought of him gaining entry. That was until I felt my heart suddenly arrive at a complete stop in my chest as I listened to the fateful sound of the keypad indicating a successful code entry, followed by the loud and heavy thunk of the steel deadbolt retreating quickly back into the door, unlocking it. In this moment, time stopped entirely. I no longer had a sense of it, or the space around me in which I currently occupied, as I turned in what felt like slow motion to face the door, just in time to see it begin to be pushed open from the outside. I remember screaming involuntarily as I watched a large knife enter through the opening door first, followed by Ivan's firmly gripped hand around it. Remembering at this point that Jonathan was still in his truck on the other side of the stand, I ran to the window and screamed desperately through the now closed and locked panel of glass. "Jonathan, he's got a fucking knife!" Jonathan's eyes grew huge, and he literally flew out of the driver's side of his truck towards the back door of the stand. I turned facing the back door, just in time to see Ivan step into the stand, a mere 10 feet from where I stood. For the rest of my life, I will never ever forget the look on his face as his eyes met mine. It was clear he knew that I was now helplessly aware of the reality of my situation. He looked intoxicated with the power he knew he now held over me in this moment. I have never felt so much hate come from one person before. Until now, I had hoped this type of evil, as pure as it revealed itself to be before me now, existed only in places far removed from the world I moved within. I had hoped that I would be lucky enough never to encounter it, as I harbored no desire whatsoever to make its acquaintance. Ivan took a total of 2 steps towards me before I saw an arm being thrown violently around his neck from behind. As I stood there in a state of paralysis due to fear, I watched as Jonathan pulled Ivan back by the neck with so much force his feet flew out from beneath him. Suddenly, both Ivan and Jonathan were on the ground right outside the door, with Jonathan securing Ivan in a headlock nearly impossible to break away from. He was yelling at him strict instructions not to move, not a single muscle, or he would choke the life out of him. Surprisingly, Ivan remained completely still, never once making any signs of resistance. Jonathan kicked the knife away from his reach and told me to pick it up and secure it until the cops arrived. Upon hearing this, I finally remembered I was still on the phone with 911, who had heard what was happening on my end and dispatched every available unit within a 30-mile radius to my location, marking my call in their response system as the highest priority. It felt like hours before the cops arrived, but once I had a chance to look back on the duration of my call to 911, I realized it had been a mere 4 minutes before over 30 local city, county, and state patrol units overtook the area. To this day, I have never seen so many cops respond to a single call before. At least 6 cops descended on Ivan at once, relieving the grip Jonathan had been holding around his neck, and forcibly, more than necessary to my silent pleasure, detaining Ivan and carrying him practically hogtied into a waiting cruiser. Apparently, while speaking with the cops after being securely restrained and unable to flee, Ivan insisted continuously that I was his wife. God had told him, after all. God had told him that I was intended for him. I belonged to him, God said. He was simply there that morning to collect that which he had been promised. Before I start this story, I just wanted to say that this is actually a story I did almost a year ago. I'm redoing this because there's an update to the story that's going to be included after the story. So rather than make everyone hunt down a video to figure out what happened before, here it is. If you remember the story and you want to just skip to the update, I'll have a timestamp in the comments as well as the description. This story was also verified by the moderators of Let's Not Meet, though the original poster would not like to share those with us, probably because it has private information. And on to the story. Against the advice of my parents, I started working at a bikini coffee stand when I was 17 years old, and continued working there until I was 20. If you are unfamiliar with bikini coffee stands, they are little drive-through espresso stands, usually painted in some neon color, where the employees all wear lingerie or bikinis while they serve coffee. I know this sounds strange, and believe me, it is strange. However, the money was good, it was fun at the time, and my parents couldn't really afford to pay for college. There is no loudspeaker where the customers place their order. They simply drive up to the stand, order coffee, and to make small talk as they all go you and your skimpy assemble. Within a matter of months, the boss gave me the busiest shift. The shift began at 4 a.m. and ended at 9:30 a.m. Though the coffee stand was not officially open until 4:30, I had to count the till, grind the espresso beans, fill the sinks, take stock, clean if needed, etc. The coffee stand was situated in the corner of a large parking lot, sharing the enormous lot with only one other retailer. The other retailer didn't open until around 10 a.m., so when I arrived the lot was completely dark, save for one dim street lamp above the stand, and another in the far corner of the lot. I pulled up to the stand as I normally did, only this time it was my shift alone. Normally I would work with another girl, as the shift would get far too busy for just one person. I had a routine with regular customers, as I literally worked every single day. The boss didn't believe in time off, unless requested. While I worked, I could see cars approach the stand, and know immediately what drink to prepare, based on my recognition of a regular customer's vehicle. After almost a year on morning shift, it was rare to see a new vehicle or meet a new customer. My boss was extremely strict about being fast and efficient, and would have us prepare drinks in advance for our regular customers while they waited in the line of cars. My boss was so strict that for the first 6 months of my working there, he would watch constantly on his camera system and call me on the business phone to scream at me for a lack of efficiency. After this, I became so fast at preparing drinks, I guess he decided he would save money by having me work alone in the very early morning hours. He was stingy too. So, like normal, I approached the stand and punched in the access code. I went inside and turned on some music right away to keep myself company. The streetlight directly above the shop had burnt out a few days before, so it was rather dark outside. Coupled with the tinted sliding windows of the coffee stand, and the knowledge that I was completely alone, I felt a little creeped out, though not nearly as creeped out and terrified as I was about to feel in a few minutes. Even though the stand was technically open at 4:30, I didn't expect my first customer until about 4:45. I usually arrived at 4, but since it was my shift alone, I came in at 3:30 to give myself enough time to complete all of the opening tasks. My first customer was Dave. He drove a red sports car and ordered a double cappuccino, heavy on the foam. He worked for the local Boeing plant and would brag about his high-ranking job in between awkward remarks about my body. You get used to this sort of thing after a while, but nothing could prepare me for the sort of thing that happened to me on this particular dark morning. Though many of our customers were pervy men like Dave, most of the early morning customers weren't as lecherous as one would expect. They simply needed coffee and no other business was open as early as ours. In fact, many of the early morning customers were married women in soccer mom vans in desperate need of caffeine. I glanced up at the clock as I counted the money in the till. 3:50 a.m. I finished the count and walked from the back of the stand onto the main floor. There were 2 steps separating the back of the stand from the main floor. The back of the stand had no windows and contained a bathroom, large refrigerator, washer, dryer, etc. This is the area where my coworkers and myself would get ready and joke around where customers couldn't see us. As soon as we walked onto the main floor, where customers could see us, uniform was required, meaning lingerie or bikini, as well as heels. That morning I was wearing a matching pink lingerie set with knit stockings. The lingerie fully covered my breasts and buttocks, and provided more coverage than a typical bikini you would see at the beach. I counted all of the syrup supplies. I opened the fridge and took stock inside. I turned on the espresso grinder and robotically poured in a bag of espresso beans. I started filling up the large commercial sink with soapy water, music playing softly on the stereo. Then I heard it. Over the noise of the faucet, coffee grinder, and the music, I wasn't sure I heard anything at first, so I just ignored it. Then I heard it again. Someone was tapping on the sliding glass window of the stand. I wiped off my wet hands and grabbed my cell phone. 4:15 a.m. We weren't open for another 15 minutes. I checked the light switches to make sure I didn't accidentally flip on the open sign. Along with an open sign, the stand was equipped with bright floodlights to illuminate the presence of the stand. Due to the sheer darkness that morning, I had contemplated turning on the floodlights when I first arrived, but it was strictly forbidden to do so unless the stand was open. Without the floodlights on, and through the tinted glass, I could not see who was on the other side. I stood there, staring at the window. Maybe it's just Dave, I rationalized to myself. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears. The tapping had definitely grown louder. I picked up the business phone and punched in my boss's number. He had an extensive camera system, complete with night vision, and could see in real time both inside and outside of the stand. At the very least, he could tell me who was outside. The phone rang and rang. No answer. I flipped on the floodlights. I walked over to the window and saw the man, now illuminated by the bright lights. His head was pressed up against the window, hands cupped around his eyes as he tried to see in. I jumped back. "Hi," he yelled through the glass. "Can I get some coffee?" "We aren't open for another 15 minutes, I replied. "My boss will be mad if I open early." "Oh, well, I can wait." The man then walked away from the window and stepped into a small black Honda. I continued my opening duties, warily eyeing the black Honda. At the time, I felt a false sense of security, lulled into the daily routine of my shift. However, this was different. At 4:30, I dutifully turned on the open sign and watched as the man in the black Honda drove up to the window. He was wearing a dark red baseball cap, a thermal shirt, and plaid pajama pants. I opened the sliding window. "Hi, sorry about that. What can I get for you this morning?" I said, trying to sound as normal as possible. The man looked at me for what felt like an eternity. "What I want doesn't appear to be on the menu," he said, not looking up from my crotch. "Okay, so I know what you're thinking. What did I expect working in this profession? Gentlemen?" I brushed this comment aside with a laugh. "We have a great white chocolate mocha." I looked around frantically. Where the hell was the usual morning guy, Dave? I silently prayed another customer would pull up behind this guy. He looked away and stared at his steering wheel. "I want you to be my maid." "Excuse me?" I said, not sure if I heard him correctly. "I want you to be my maid." I want you to come over to my house, wearing a maid costume with nothing underneath. I want to watch you, and if you don't clean correctly, I'm going to do whatever I want to you." He paused and gripped his steering wheel tightly. "I am not a nice guy." He looked up at me and smiled. Until that point in my life, I had never seen a truly sinister smile before. I slammed the long service window shut. I ran to the back of the stand, hyperventilating at this point. I picked up the phone and dialed my boss repeatedly. No answer. I stood on the steps and peered out the window. The black Honda was gone, replaced by the familiar red of Dave's sports car. I never thought I would be happy to see pervy Dave, but there I was rushing to the serving window to tell him what had happened. I opened the window, all the while frantically relaying the story. Dave just laughed and muttered something about the guy dreaming. He told me that I was being paranoid, and the guy just had no filter. For some reason, this put me at ease. Dave reached his hand in the window to place a $5 bill in the tip jar. He tipped this amount each morning. "Wow," he exclaimed. "You just opened and your tip jar is already full. I know you make good coffee, but it's not that great." "Huh?" I said, slamming the register shut. The tip jar rested on the outside window ledge, so customers could reach it. I made it a habit of just leaving it outside in between customers, as it could get very busy. I leaned over and looked into the metal canister. Inside the tip jar was a long white envelope that appeared to be stuffed to its capacity. My stomach turned, as I knew it had to be from the guy in the black Honda. "Dave," I said cautiously, "it's from that guy that I told you about. I am not opening that." Dave sipped his cappuccino and suddenly his goofy demeanor turned serious. "You're right. Let me open it. I have gloves." It was late fall and rather cold out. Dave put on his gloves in a dramatic manner, laughing about my paranoia, and proceeded to step outside of his car. He took the envelope out of my tip jar and opened it. "Holy shit," he said, his eyes widening. He held up a stack of $20 bills held together by a rubber band. On the back of the stack was a folded up piece of paper. He unfolded the paper and began reading it. His eyes grew even wider. His hands were shaking ever so slightly. "What? What does it say?" He simply replied, "Get dressed and call the police." I snatched the note from him, his jaw slightly agape. The note was laden with spelling errors and looked as if it was written in a child's hand. Oddly, there were rather long words that were attempted, but spelled incorrectly. It said some very deranged things. There are some things too sick to mention here, but I will relay the basic message as best as I can recall. Some things you just never forget, even if you want to. So here it is, without the full length. It was 2 pages long, front and back. "You will come to my house. When you arrive, I will examine you thoroughly. I will then tie you to the post and you will be punished for what you do. Every inch of your body will be bruised and sore. Afterwards, I will untie you and use you in every way possible." He used a different term, but it is extremely graphic and includes the words hogtied. "You can scream, but no one will hear you. This is your first payment. Upon reading this note and taking this money, you have agreed to follow through. If you do not follow through, you are a stealing, lying whore, and you will be punished more severely than if you cooperated to this initial agreement. You will clean every inch of my house. There will be no mistakes, or there will be punishment to follow." I got dressed and called the police, and my boss, who finally answered. The police arrived and I went to the station to explain in detail what happened. I handed them the note, along with the money for evidence. The female police officer, who appeared to be in charge, nonchalantly told me that I should probably quit my job, that this behavior was to be expected from customers. I told her I had never experienced anything like this before. My boss reviewed the outside videotape footage. The footage showed a man standing outside the coffee shop window, just staring inside. Occasionally, It showed him leaning his head into the glass and cupping his hands around his eyes for a better view. It also showed him rubbing his crotch. Apparently, he had been standing outside the window since 3:40 a.m., 10 minutes after my initial arrival. At one point, it showed him go back into his car, only to re-emerge several minutes later and finally tap on the window. I was shocked to realize the man had watched me for almost a full hour without my knowledge. I felt stupid, but most of all, scared. The footage also revealed that the man had his license plates covered with what appeared to be white paper. After reviewing the footage and the note, the police decided that the man posed a potential threat, and that his behavior was not normal. Duh. They sent an undercover cop to the stand with me. I was shocked that they wanted me to go right back to work, not even 2 hours after the incident. The cop sat outside in an SUV while I worked. The plan was this. If the man drove through again, I was to flick the open sign on and off to alert him of the man's presence. I worked, serving all of my regular customers, trying my best to pretend nothing happened. I was told not to recall the incident to any of my coworkers or customers that morning, in case they knew the man and warned them of police involvement. The man did not return that day, but he did return. Little did I know, that was only the beginning of a year-long nightmare. I felt tense. Not the kind of tension you feel when waiting for something important or valuable, a late UPS package, the results for an exam or interview. I felt the very specific brand of eye-darting, jump at every sound, stomach acid in your mouth type of tense, as I returned to work just a few days after the creepy voyeuristic encounter. I refused to continue working early morning shifts alone, and insisted that my boss return to the previous scheduling of having 2 baristas on the opening shift. My boss agreed, stating that it was a good idea, but I could sense his underlying reluctance. He had already entrusted me with the entry code to the stand, as well as the code to the safe where we stored large bills. I had worked there the longest, by far. He knew he couldn't replace me, so he agreed to my wishes. My favorite coworker joined me on the morning shift, which provided me with great comfort. We even started laughing and joking around. As we served caffeinated drink after caffeinated drink, the stereo boomed around us. A mixed CD we found in the stand played on repeat. Behind the facade of silly and flirty bikini barista, I was walking on a mental tightrope. I felt as if any minute that creepy man would come back, and off I would tumble, down off the fickle security of the tightrope and into the unknown. After a few days, I grew complacent to my regular routine. The incident from days ago didn't seem so sharp and fresh. The walking on wire feeling was gone and replaced by a dull sense of security. There were no updates from the police, not even so much as a follow-up call. Maybe it wasn't so serious after all, I rationalized to myself. My boss must have been taking it seriously, however. He had purchased pepper spray and a taser for the stand, both of which were readily available right above the cash register. One morning, a week or so after the incident, my bleary-eyed coworker and I trudged into the stand as normal. Once inside, we were greeted by a small white package with a familiar neon green sticky note. The sticky notes we kept in the stand. The sticky note read, "Sarah, this is for you. Left here by Turner." It was signed off by our new coworker April. That means the package was left here last night, during her closing shift. Instantly, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I don't know anyone named Turner, I mumbled to my coworker, who now appeared very awake. Before I had a chance to act, my coworker declared that she was going to open the package. Inside of the box lay intricately wrapped tissue paper with a note card on top. I instantly recognized the childlike handwriting. It was him. It had to be him. After my coworker read the note aloud, I was too scared to rifle through the neatly folded wrapping paper to see what else was inside. My coworker, being both extremely curious and extremely mortified, took the opportunity to look through the rest of the package. She produced an impossibly small, skimpy maid's outfit, like the kind you might see on Halloween. Upon realizing what it was, she flung the outfit away from her as if it were covered in 1,000 tiny spiders. I'm sure she didn't want to imagine what this pervert may have done to the fabric before giving it to me. We both washed our hands in scalding hot soapy water as I reflected upon the note. This time the creepy letter detailed desires to have me live with him and watch me shrink in size until I could fit into the tiny maid's outfit. The note also contained, in graphic detail, the violent manner in which the man wanted to screw me. The outfit he had given me looked as if it was tailored to fit only the tiniest of humans. My mind conjured up images of being chained up and starved in some dark basement. I shuddered, hard. My coworker and I talked about calling the police. After the treatment I received from the police last time, we decided it would be better to wait until we could obtain some CCTV footage from our boss. Maybe this time the creep wouldn't be wearing a hat and his identity wouldn't be obscured by the darkness. The floodlights were quite bright when on during shifts. I called my boss and left him a message. I didn't expect him to be awake yet, as it was only just after 4 a.m. To my surprise, the business phone rang a few minutes later. To my further surprise and horror, it wasn't my boss. "Did you like the present, Sarah?" I felt like throwing up. During the silence, I could hear that he had some sort of pornographic audio playing, which sounded incredibly violent in nature. I asked him how he knew my name. After all, it's not like we wore name tags. He told me that April, the new worker that I had trained only days earlier, had told him my name. Along with my name, she apparently stated that I was very interested in him. He went on to express how happy he was that I liked him, and that he couldn't wait to meet up and follow through on the arrangement we had made. I was confused and terrified. "What arrangement?" I asked, my voice shaking. He told me that April had accepted an envelope with a payment inside, along with some information, an address and a meeting date, that she was to pass it on to me. I clarified that I knew nothing of this so-called arrangement. Suddenly angered, he demanded that I give him the money back if I wasn't going to follow through. His anger made me feel brave. Before I even realized it, I was shouting as loudly as possible. "I never agreed to a damn thing. I don't want your money. I don't like you. Do not call. Do not come back. I called the police on you once, and if you come back, I will call them again." With that, I slammed the receiver down. I was so confused at this point. I immediately wish I had said more. I wish I had said something clever. Hell, maybe I should have even played along, lured the man back to the stand right away with the police waiting nearby. Then maybe they would take me more seriously. Damn it. In this moment, I thought, I am so dumb. April, our new coworker, had a history of drug abuse, workplace prostitution, and thievery. She was infamous around the bikini barista circuit, having worked at nearly every stand in the area. A couple of my coworkers had worked with April in the past at other locations. She was notoriously known for giving more than an eyeful if a customer would tip her extra. But would she really agree to something so awful on my behalf? Was she as two-faced and devious as my coworkers made her out to be? If this man handed April an envelope full of cash, she would likely keep it for herself. But what about the supposed address? If I had the address and meeting date, the cops could catch this guy. I really didn't think of April as a bad person, just a broken one. I didn't care what she did with her body on her own time, nor did I find prostitution in and of itself to be inherently wrong. But the fact that she was potentially making our workplace an unsafe space added to my stress. If she was willing to misrepresent the stand, and therefore the rest of us, by providing services not specified to a coffee stand, would she go as so far to misrepresent me personally to a psycho stalker? My coworker and I talked about the situation until the phone rang again. This time it was my boss. After breathing a sigh of relief, I explained the situation and demanded the CCTV footage from last night's shift. "I don't have it," my boss said. "I am no longer recording. We are strictly doing live streaming only now, meaning I can watch you girls and make sure that you're safe, but there will no longer be archived footage. You know, because of the stands that got busted for prostitution. I was beyond confused at this point. What are you talking about? My boss explained that 2 other nearby bikini stands just made national headlines because baristas were performing sexual acts for customers. A couple of whom turned out to be undercover detectives with the Seattle Police Department. His reasoning was that he couldn't control what girls did on the various shifts, and if he saw any misconduct, he would fire them immediately. However, he explained, if the police figured out any funny business was going on before he did, and subpoenaed the videotapes, he would be in hot water too. He explained that he didn't have time to go through every minute of footage. It wasn't until later on that I figured out the additional reasoning behind this. Some of the girls that would come to work at the stand were only 16 or 17 years old. If they decided to illegally put on a nude show, and my boss had it on tape, he would immediately be in possession of child pornography, regardless if he was unaware of the footage. I informed him that April may pose potential problems if the stories about her were true. It seemed to be common knowledge that April was performing sexual shows for tips. I don't know what you're talking about, my boss said, in the flattest tone ever. Okay. I didn't know what else to say. I was so mad. I hung up the phone and silently contemplated the manner in which I was going to quit my job. But first, I needed to get that note from April. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And make sure to let me know down in the comments what you thought about this. And if you would like to gain early access to all of my content, as well as some other cool perks, make sure you go check out my Patreon page. It's a cool way for you guys to get some perks, as well as help support the channel. So check it out. So in the first story, I definitely think she handled that situation well, having her ex stay there to make sure everything was cool, because it obviously wasn't. And I'm happy things didn't take an even worse turn. Now for the second story. Like I said, that was one I'd done about a year ago, but then it had that update to it, which kinda leaves it open. But I think they were wanting to do a series, that's why it was. But they also did comment an update to the original post, the one that was verified. Essentially it was saying that this happened a long time ago. She ended up actually moving and changing her name because one of the coworkers got nudes of her, I think it was April or something like that. You can go check it out with the link in the description. But she left, changed her name, all that, and she heard a description kind of the guy that sounded like him that might have been busted, but yeah, I guess they're not really too sure. But yeah, if you want to go hear the rest of the updates, make sure you go check out that link in the description. I've been missing putting videos out, and sorry about that. I've been very busy with things. Between the wife's surgery, which went very well. The first day sucked, but everything's good now. To the book I'm working on, Dance in the Dark, which I really need to get done. That's why I've been concentrating more on that. Believe it or not, it's easier to match up music to my stories on here than it is over there. So that takes a lot of time. Not like you really care, but I care. And this is my video, so deal with it. Seriously though, I have actually missed commenting with everyone, so make sure you leave a comment down below. It's been well over a week since I've posted. I'll catch you guys in the next video. And just remember,
it's always scarier if it's true, baby.